Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. We are broadcasting, in this particular case, from the studios at American Family Radio in Tupelo, Mississippi. Yesterday, we were in Birmingham, Alabama, and I might just mention we'll be back in Dallas on Friday, and that's going to be a great opportunity. Once again, we'll be bringing together Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, and looking at all sorts of issues in the news. So a lot to cover today. And certainly if we don't get to all those issues, we'll cover some more of that issue tomorrow. Let me, if I can, point you real quickly to the website, because we have a couple of articles that I wanted to talk about. And a little bit later, we hope to have the president of American Family Association and the host of today's issues at American Family Radio, and that's Tim Wildman. But first, let me just mention that we have a couple of articles on Olympics aren't fun anymore. I thought I'd focus on that for just a minute, since the Olympics have been taking place over the last couple of days. Also, lies at the January 6th hearing. So we may cover some of those in this first hour. Then I really kind of left to the next hour the discussions that we will have about the mask guidance, which, according to the editors of National Review, they think is going to backfire, as well as the other mandated issues. Not just mask mandates, but vaccine mandates. We had some conversation about that yesterday, but certainly want to hear your comments once again. And then we'll get into a couple of other issues in the news. Let me just also mention that one of the things that we have posted today is my Viewpoints commentary. As I've been traveling lately, I found that a lot of people know that I do a commentary, but they don't realize that you can actually sign up to receive it in your inbox Monday through Friday. As a matter of fact, Penna Dexter does one a week, and we put that one in your inbox on Saturday. My one today is about IRS and churches, so I may get back to that in just a few minutes. It's kind of an update on the case of Christians engaged that were actually losing their tax, or actually never given their tax-exempt status. That now has been given to them, so you might think, well, that's over, but I have some other points to make about the fact that if indeed you could deny the tax-exempt status for a Christian organization for the fact that they were holding to biblical ideas and what we could consider to be biblical doctrine, that same kind of argument could be used to deny the tax-exempt status of churches. And lest you think that I'm overreacting, I then also in the commentary quote from an individual that wants to do just that. Now, is that a majority? No. So I want to put into perspective the fact that churches may not lose their tax-exempt status anytime soon, but you can kind of hear the drumbeat, and so that's one of the topics we will address in the future. But let me get to my first article here, and it has to do with the Olympics. We don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about the Olympics, and either you've been watching them or ignoring them, but this piece by Brandon Morris reminds me only so well that in the past, as he points out, I used to look forward to the Olympics. I know that many of you have been maybe glued to the television set, and there have been questions about some of the individuals that we were hoping were going to come home with the gold, and for whatever reason, either because in Simone Biles' case or others, they decided that they could not compete, or they did their best but simply came in second, or whatever it might be. But Brandon reminds us that the Olympics have been suffering for some time, and these have been the most highly watched and publicized events oftentimes. but not this year. And I think that over time, the emphasis on all sorts of having the Olympics be woke, the Olympics trying to be politically correct, have created a real disaster. And he uses a kind of a funny illustration. And if you'd like to read this and maybe post it on your Facebook page or something else to maybe get some conversation going, he uses the example that it's kind of like you go to a dinner party and you have somebody that's actually drank too much and then blurts out all sorts of inappropriate things, and everybody's kind of, hoping that he will just stop talking. And he says that's sort of what the media has done and the left has done with the Olympics. He reminds us, if you go back even to 2016, already the International Olympic Committee was addressing the issue of transgender athletes and proclaiming that men were in fact women. And we've, of course, seen some of that play out in this particular Olympics. He points out that during that same year in 2016, the opening ceremonies in Brazil had a demonstration about the sea levels rising in the world if we don't address climate change. Then he points out that 2 years later, that would be the 2018 Winter Olympics. That's where the media made such a big deal about Adam Rippon and Gus Kenworthy, two homosexual athletes who, as he says, wanted you to know that they are there and that the Vice President Mike Pence should get used to it. And as he points out, the Vice President at the time, Mike Pence, never said anything negative about the two, but they kept using this as a way to kind of advance the homosexual agenda. And so then he says, well, fast forward to today, and you've got Gwen Berry turning away from our flag and ignoring the national anthem because she's a, quote, athlete that's an activist. And then, of course, you have Megan Rapinoe with the women's soccer team and doing all the things that she has done for some time. And he says, if you think about this, imagine the impact this is having on the other athletes. He says, imagine working your entire life to protect your game in a certain sport. You've trained longer, harder, and shed more sweat, tears, and even blood in the pursuit of being the best. You've sacrificed personal relationships and a solid chunk of your young life to fly under the flag of your country to defeat the best of other countries. But then, after you maybe win the gold or the silver, people aren't talking about you. They're talking about the person next to you who's made some kind of political statement. And if you look back on your year in the Olympics, they'll remember that person and not your victory over the best the world has to offer. And so he kind of winds down by saying, the people who push politics ruin it for everyone, and they do so with their conscience fully in agreement because they really believe that they're doing something good. But he points out that is really kind of the danger of all of this activism. We have said on this program before, and maybe even on our Friday weekend edition, Lathan Watts made the case a week ago that even if your issue is one that we would agree with, it could be pro-life issues, it could be marriage, it could be all sorts of things we agree with, it's still not the right location for that. And there are some times in which you just really want to say, some people, oftentimes on the left, what you are doing is not helping. What you're doing is taking away from the Olympic event, from the World Series, from the NBA Finals, from whatever this might be that needs to maybe be our focus. And I think so many of us would really just like people to stop being so political during these events and stop trying to politicize these events. They deserve attention under their own. And I think Brandon reminds us that the Olympics aren't really fun anymore. And he reminds us that it not only is not helping advance the cause, but it's really deflecting and causing us to lose focus on some of these individuals that are the best in the world in Olympics. But instead, the people we tend to remember are the ones with their fist in the air, with their backs to the flag, and causing all sorts of disruption. Anyway, I'd love to get your comments about that later. We need to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Earlier this month, I talked about the ruling from the IRS that denied tax-exempt status to the group Christians Engaged. The IRS argument was that the Bible teachings of the group align with the views of Republicans. The IRS has reversed the decision, but the controversy surfaced some issues that need to be considered. When some members of Congress heard of the IRS decision to deny the request for tax-exempt status, they fired off a letter to the IRS commissioner. They called for him to personally review this determination and remove the individual or individuals responsible for the blatantly biased, discriminatory, and flawed reasoning that led to the determination. At this point, it would be tempting to move on since the original ruling was changed. But the members of Congress in their letter pointed to a troubling issue. The reason the IRS ruled against the Christian organization was because it affirmed the sanctity of life, the definition of marriage, and biblical justice. Those are views that they argued are held by thousands of Christian churches across the country. Now, perhaps you're thinking that this is an overreaction to one IRS ruling. Perhaps, but consider that one member of Congress recently suggested that the Catholic Church should be punitively stripped of its tax-exempt status because the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops voted to draft a document that would rebuke pro-abortion Catholic politicians. It's possible that such comments are only meant to scare churches and Christian leaders into silence, or perhaps they truly believe that government should strip any tax benefits from religious groups that hold views contrary to the administration. In either case, Christians need to pay attention. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Loneliness, go to viewpoints.info/loneliness. That's viewpoints.info/loneliness.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, broadcasting today from American Family Radio, and been such great host here in Tupelo, Mississippi, and we want to spend some time now looking at the hearings there for January 6th. It's one of the articles we've posted, so if we go through this fairly quickly, and I will because there is a lot for show, but it isn't necessarily something that I think is worth a whole lot of discussion, because if indeed the goal of this particular hearing was to try to figure out how to make the United States Capitol more secure, that doesn't seem to be what's being said right now. But I did want to cover some of that for just a little bit to at least acknowledge that these hearings are taking place. And I think this particular piece from Red State does a very good job. Then as a program note, let me just mention at the bottom of the hour, we're going to be talking with an individual who is the editor of a new Christian magazine. It's called Premier Christianity. And that magazine is one that you might want to know about. It actually started in England. And we are always looking for good sources of news and information and commentary. And so you have heard us in the past emphasize the stream, and we've pointed you to different websites and really want you to be able to get information that you can trust. And so this is just beginning, and I will certainly be monitoring it to see if some of those stories are ones that we would want to post, or whether or not we have, later on maybe questions about the way some of these stories are covered. So I'm always looking for that, and I think one of the biggest questions almost all of us are having here in the 21st century is, who do you trust? I mean, after all, you hear so many different stories and you sort of wonder what you can believe, what you can't believe. So those are just a few topics that we will be getting into, and we'll spend a little more time talking with those that are involved with that in just a few minutes. But one of the articles we've posted on the website, it comes from Red State, reminds us that the hearings so far have become very partisan. No surprise there when there was an attempt to try to put a few people on these hearings that might have asked, I think, really tough questions, or are individuals that might have disagreed with Nancy Pelosi. That did not take place. And, of course, what you have are some of the testimony. And as I've said before, everybody has their take on some of these issues, but the way in which they cover some of those issues, I think, illustrates, again, the kind of bias that takes place. So we have posted this particular article, and I will get back to that in just a minute, but I'm actually now joined in studio by the president of American Family Association, and Tim Wildman is a good friend. And Tim, it is just great to have you right here, sitting across from me right here at Point of View in the AFR studios.
Hey, welcome to Tupelo.
It is so good to have you here.
You're supposed to say thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes. You know, this is a place for Elvis, and we've seen a lot of that as well. But I know you've been very busy. I know you have to head out in just a few minutes. But since we were able to slip you into the studio, I just wanted to, if nothing else, remind all of our listeners of the great work that you do at AFR. And a lot of the people that listen to this program do not hear American Family Radio. So talk about what's going on, because this is a pretty exciting time for you guys.
Yeah, Christian radio is a wonderful instrument for reaching the world for Jesus, right, Kerby?
Yes.
And for telling the truth about what's happening in our country. And that's why American Family Radio exists. I know you're on other wonderful Christian radio networks. A lot of those folks like Bot Radio and others are friends of ours.
Yes.
And we just are so thankful for Christian radio in general. But we here at AFR, we have a calling to do more than play music. We don't really play a lot of music. Nothing wrong with playing music, worship music, and that's wonderful. But we feel like there's a more urgent matter for us. It's the heartbeat of Point of View every day.
Yeah.
It's the same as ours, and that is we can't lose our country. And we can see the waterfall, right?
Yes.
From our canoe.
That's right.
To use a metaphor.
Are we going to go over the end?
Right.
That's right.
Right. So the rapids are increasing to continue on with this. And it's our job as Christians in our country to occupy until the Lord comes. And we have the most wonderful country in the world, even with all its faults and its flaws and some sad history that we are all too familiar with, right? But still, my dad used to say that the United States of America has done the best for the most in human history.
Right.
When you consider that. So we can't lose it because we have freedom here. We have liberty. We have the right to worship and to practice our faith and to raise our families with our convictions. So we have the right to self-government. That was tested last election, right?
Yeah,
we still don't know. We still don't know absolutely whether we had true self-government in the last presidential election. There's a lot of question marks there. But I will say this. So we can't lose our country. So we have to fight.
Yes.
The other side's fighting.
Yes.
We have to fight. So we keep an eternal perspective. God is in control. Even if America collapses totally, God is still in control. And life goes on. Life will go on in some form or fashion. But we have that perspective. But we also have the perspective that God tells us in Rome and all through the Scripture, in Matthew chapter 5, we're to be salt and light.
That's right.
Right. So we have to do our part, as God's called us to do, to reach the world for Christ and also to preserve the greatest country in the world.
You know, one of the things I carry around, and I showed it to you yesterday, was the August issue that, and this is a letter that just came out from you, Is It Too Late for America? And I thought it was very well written. And by the way, that's another reason why those of you listening, in addition to supporting Point of View, I really encourage you to support American Family Association. In fact, I have this letter shows that I've been giving to AFR and AFA for years and years.
Thank the Anderson family.
But the bottom line is, you ask a good question. Is it too late for America. Now, you give some very sobering statistics, but I think you and I both have the dedication that it's not too late for America, but we're going to go down swinging and fighting anyway. But what can you say? Because I think this has been the goal of your father, and it's your goal, and it's the goal of your kids who are actually now doing radio as well.
Yeah, well, I guess it's an open-ended question, isn't it, really? We don't really know what the final outcome will be in the question of, can we save America? Is it too late for America? But in reference to my last comments, as you say, we can't go down without a fight. And, who knows? There's been a first Great Awakening, right? A second Great Awakening. There could be a third.
I would hope so.
Great Awakening, and millions of Christians in the country are praying for revival. And so God could miraculously send revival to our land. So we don't know. We're not giving up hope that we can. In warfare, you have the war, right, which is decided in the end. But in the middle of that, you have all these battles.
Right.
Well, we're fighting the battles.
We are.
You can't win the war if you don't fight the battles. The battle for life, that is abortion we're talking about here. The battle for religious liberty and religious freedom is Point of View, and Kelly Shackelford, our good friend, and others, Matt Staver and others, fight on a daily basis in the courtrooms across the country. We have the legislative aspect that's David Barton and so many others have worked hard to get Christian elected to school boards, city councils, mayors, state legislatures, governorships, Senate, House, and the presidency. So we have to work on that end. So it's just multifaceted. I should put it this way, to continue with the war metaphor, there are multiple battlefronts going on, and American Family Association, American Family Radio are engaged in as many of those as we can be.
And I'm just thinking, too, radio is a very good opportunity. I was with you this morning when we did today's issues, and I used the old illustration that comes from an old film, if you build it, they will come. Well, we've built 350,000 churches around the country, and they're not necessarily always coming inside the church, and even if they are, they need more information, and that's what Christian radio does. It reaches people that maybe never would come to your church. It also educates people throughout the week because you can't get all the information that you need there in a Sunday sermon.
Right.
And so, again, I just encourage people to support you.
Thank you.
I know you have to run off, but it's afa.net. Again, American Family Association. And
our app for radio is AFR. You can find it.
AFR.
AFR. So you can listen to AFR anywhere you go with our app.
And we have a link there on our website, as we always do. And we're seeing that building for the Don Wildman Center. And I know you're going to be opening that a couple months from now. And we want to come back and maybe do some broadcast and do what we can to emphasize that.
Absolutely. So, we're going to keep going and growing.
That's
and
right.
Expanding and changing the culture. That's our goal. So, those battles will be going on long after you and I are gone. Gone from the radio stage or gone to heaven, one of the
wherever.
Yeah.
Again, this piece on is it too late for America? Of course, that's just something you get from AFA, but we'll make it available here at Point of View as well. Tim, I know you have to run off, and I just appreciate you popping in here for a minute in the midst of your very busy day. So,
Kerby,
thank you.
It's an honor. I've been a fan of yours and Point of View for decades now, and I just encourage you to keep going.
We're going to take a break, and we have more to cover in the news. We're also going to talk about this premier Christian magazine, all that coming up right after these important messages.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, broadcasting today from the studios of American Family Radio in Tupelo, Mississippi. Tomorrow we'll be broadcasting again from the Dallas studios, and just wanted you to have a chance to hear a little bit from, of course, just a minute ago, Tim Wildman, who is the head of American Family Association, of course, the host of AFR's Today's Issues and much more. Let me also now see if we can focus a little bit more of intention on the need for us to get trustworthy news and information and commentary. And we talk about this on a pretty regular basis. Of course, you have some of our booklets that I've produced on everything from social media to media bias. And there is a magazine called Premier Christianity, which is actually the leading Christian magazine in England, in the UK. Well, they now have an opportunity to develop an American version of that, so you would benefit from some of the material they have there, but also some of the stories here. And so we wanted you to know more about that. We have a link to premierchristianity.com. You can find that on the website. Of course, you also can click on that. And we bring now to the microphone Sam Hales, who is the editor of Premier Christianity. It is, as I said, a leading Christian magazine there in the UK. He's also an elder at Christ Central Church in South London. So, Sam, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
It's my pleasure, Kirby. Wonderful to be with you.
If you can, for all of us, since most of us are just learning about this for the first time, give us a little bit of the history of Premier Christianity.
Yes, it'd be my pleasure. Thank you. Premier Christianity magazine has actually been around since 1965. We trace our history and our heritage back to a magazine called Buzz, which was launched in 1965 here in the UK. So it's been around a long time. We've been under various names since then, and then Premier, which is the largest Christian media company in Europe, purchased the magazine, and we became known as Christianity and then as Premier Christianity magazine. So over the past 50-plus years, we've got a long track record now of tackling the big issues facing Christians here in the UK, but beyond as well. And so as a magazine, we like to take a look at issues ranging from theology to politics to church practice, testimonies of how well-known people have become Christians. There's all sorts of different range of features and interviews that we like to publish each and every month inside the magazine. And as I say, it's a wonderful joy for me to be editing the magazine that's been around for so long and has that amazing track record of keeping Christians up to date with all that God is doing in the UK church and beyond. And of course, especially exciting to be talking to you today, Kirby, because I'm a real lover of all things American. I love your country so much, and I miss visiting it because of the latest pandemic. But it's a real joy for us to be launching Premier Christianity in the US this month as well.
Well, let me also give that website then, and that's the one we have linked on our website right now, pointofview.net. It's premierinsight.org, because some people might say, well, I'm kind of curious about what's happening in the UK, but if you're going to be covering what's happening in the United States, but also maybe helping us know a little bit what's happening worldwide, we'd be really interested. So give us an idea there, because that is something that is probably new to most of our listeners. It's new to me. And so kind of give us the vision that you have for what you want to do now in terms of covering some of these stories that we talk about every day here on the radio.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Premier Insight is really Premier taking some of what we've learned really here in the UK and offering it to a wider audience in America. I think, one of the things that we're aware of as we look at the statistics and the trends is that both the UK and the US, we're facing similar problems, aren't we? We're facing a culture that increasingly doesn't share our foundational beliefs about God and about the gospel. And so I guess we've learned quite a lot being in secular Europe of what it's like to minister, what it's like to live as a Christian in an increasingly secular world. And so what we're hoping to do through Premier Insight is we're helping to empower and inform you to live as a confident Christian in an ever-changing world. And so we have all sorts of different resources, and the magazine is just one of those resources to help every Christian to live confidently in the truth of the gospel.
One of your visions, of course, is to help empower and inform you to live as a confident Christian and also to be equipped to live out and share your faith. So there's a place where people, as they go to our website, can find that link, or they can just go to premierinsight.org, either way, and put their email. But talk about some of the resources that would be available to some of our listeners who might want to know a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that we've done is started out as a radio show and later became a very popular podcast, and it's called Unbelievable question mark, with my colleague Justin Briley. And what Justin did was something, I guess, quite controversial in the early days. He allowed atheists to turn up on Christian radio. He had a show, and he said, well, let's have the best atheistic arguments, and let's hear them, and let's ask Christians to respond to them. And so it really became a very popular radio debate show. And what's so wonderful about that program is it really demonstrates that the Christian worldview, the teachings of Jesus and the Bible can be defended, it can be proven true. There is good evidence for what we believe. And so if you listen to Unbelievable, which is available worldwide as a podcast, and it's also got its own YouTube channel, what you'll see people of different worldviews debating with Christians. And really, I'm a huge fan of the show. I listened to it a long time before I worked for Premier. And really, what you'll discover as you engage with that podcast and that video material is that the Christian worldview can be defended because it is true, and there is evidence for what we believe. And so there'll be a different debate and discussion show each week between a Christian and perhaps an atheist or someone of another religion, and they'll be talking about all the big issues. And I think the other thing that's so special really about Unbelievable is they've even hosted discussions between Christians. And I don't know about you, Kerby, but sometimes I find that Christians don't always disagree so well. Sometimes we can become a little bit hot-headed. Sometimes we can be a little bit over the top with one another. But what Unbelievable has been able to do is get Christians who might have a different theology on it, could be anything from the end times to perhaps a political issue, and they will be able to civilly discuss those big issues together. And so really that's part of our whole mission here at Premier Insight, is to help Christians to talk to one another and to dialogue and to debate in a way that we hope will be fruitful, will generate as much light as heat, and also demonstrate to the world that as Christians we can love one another even if we disagree. We want to provide that forum where issues of faith can be discussed properly in the public square. So that's one channel of what we're doing at Premier Insight, the Unbelievable radio show and podcast with Justin Briley.
And again, that fits very well with the conversations that we have here and the mission that we have here, because I oftentimes say that what we really are trying to do is help you be able to articulate a biblical worldview and also know how to defend a biblical worldview. And of course, that's exactly what we do here at Point of View, and that is Unbelievable. One of the other parts of that radio program, before we move on to some of the other resources that you have, is I know you have a section called Ask N.T. Wright Anything. And, of course, we've had N.T. Wright on this program a number of times, and so he's certainly an individual that we've called upon, and just a good illustration of the caliber of the kind of conversations that you're having right there on the program.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, N.T. Wright is really one of the world's leading New Testament theologians. He's written countless books on all sorts of subjects, including Surprised by Hope, The Day the Revolution Began, and also his big biography of Paul, which I was a huge fan of myself. And as you say, British scholar, New Testament scholar, and that's a podcast as well, the Ask N.T. Wright Anything podcast, where Justin Briley, my colleague, will sit down with Tom Wright and he'll put listener questions to Tom Wright. And so if you get access to that podcast, not only will you be able to hear different questions being put to N.T. Wright or Tom Wright, but you'll also be able to ask your own questions of him, and that could be anything, really. He's covered all sorts of different topics on that podcast, and it's really interesting, I think, to get an insight into the mind of Tom Wright, because, of course, he's not just an academic. He also is formerly Bishop of Durham, meaning he has experience not just in theology, but also real-world pastoral experience, and that really comes across in a lot of the answers on the Ask N.T. Wright Anything podcast.
Well, we need to take a break, and when we come back, we want to continue talking about a couple of other things that you have been dealing with. And so, again, if anybody has a question, feel free to give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. Perhaps you have a question or a comment. Otherwise, when we come back, we'll just finish off with some of the things that you might want to know about Premier Christianity and the different venues and resources that are there. You can go to our website, which is pointofview.net, and find some of those resources. And so we encourage you to do so. And if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, feel free to give us a call. Then when we will come back, we'll spend some time looking at some of the issues in the news. Of course, we had the January 6 hearings, and I was beginning to do that when, of course, Tim Wildman walked in. And then we're going to get into, in the next hour, certainly all sorts of conversations. And I suspect that this will be a time when many of you would like to join us as we talk about the mask mandate, the vaccine mandates, and a number of other topics that are front and center right now. So those are some topics we will be addressing here on Point of View, and we'll be back right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes before the top of the hour, and we are talking today with Sam Hales, again, the editor of Premier Christianity and also Premier Insight. And the connections between the two are pretty significantly because we not only talk about how to articulate a biblical worldview, but how to defend a biblical worldview. As a matter of fact, one of my former colleagues is now working with what is called the Christian Atheist Book Club. And 1 month they bring in a Christian and ask all sorts of tough questions. questions. The next month they bring in an atheist and ask all sorts of questions. Of course, a lot of this comes from some of the things that we've done over the years, even in the United States, in which we'll set up various dialogue or debate. Of course, Dr. Norm Geisler and I have done a good number of those debates as well with atheists, but to have, a constructive dialogue. So these are just some of the resources that are available. If you go to our website, you'll find out more about Premier. And Sam, just before we let you go, I thought you might, for just a few minutes, talk about kind of your editorial philosophy. You've been a freelance journalist, and of course you have been involved with Premier and Premier Insight for some time. But it does seem to me that a lot of people say, well, what's the difference between, say, a Christian magazine and a secular magazine? Obviously, you come from a Christian point of view, but how does that in some ways affect the way in which you cover the news? And then as you cover the news, what about various kinds of opinions, and how do you deal with some of the differences that Christians might have in terms of doctrinal issues? Those are all issues that I know you've had to deal with for some time, and I'd love to get some of your insight.
That's a fantastic question. Yes, I think first of all, as Christians, we believe in truth, don't we? And we believe that Jesus really lived, really died, and really rose again. And so I think that gives you a really solid foundation. As a Christian journalist, I want to be reporting things that are true. I want to be, I'm a follower of Jesus, who was truth itself, is truth itself. And so I think there's a lot of criticism, isn't there, sometimes rightly, of journalists, of not being truthful, not saying the truth. But I think as a Christian, that gives you a fantastic moral and ethical underpinning to be wanting to report things that are true. But I think specifically that question about how do you cope when Christians have different opinions, so it's not a question of is it true or false, it's just different opinions, is a really great question. And really this is one of the wonderful strengths of Premier Christianity magazine, that ever since 1965 we've got this amazing track record of bringing Christians together, and we don't expect all of our readers to agree with one another. That would be impossible. But what we do hope to do is provide a magazine every single month where I can sit down and read what God is doing in another denomination, what God is doing amongst Christians who I haven't met before, what God is doing in other areas of his church. And that's what's so exciting, is we have readers who actually want to get that bigger perspective, that broader perspective. And so on premierchristianity.com, we're publishing new opinion pieces and analysis every single day. And we've just launched our brand new app as well, meaning that for just $1 you can have access to the website, to the app, and to our archive. $1 a month for your first 3 months on premierchristianity.com. And if you take part in that, what you're really doing is you're joining a community of Christians, not just here in the UK, but you're joining a community of Christians worldwide who want to engage with the big issues of their day, who want to find out what God is doing in their denomination, but also beyond that as well, and who are willing to read opinions that they may not agree with. And this really excites me, because I don't know about you, but when I look at so much of the media landscape, what's happening is we're forming tighter and tighter kind of bubbles and echo chambers, and we're really only hearing news that we already agree with. And the wonderful thing about premierchristianity.com is you will be exposed to opinions from other Christians who love Jesus, but they might be opinions different to your own. And we don't expect necessarily change anyone's mind, but what we are hoping is that all of us, myself included, will come away from premierchristianity.com with a better understanding of why a Christian might think differently from me. And so what we're actually doing is trying to build a bit of understanding and even a bit of unity across our various churches and denominations, and to see that actually there is the person of Jesus unites us beyond so many of these other things that sometimes we'll quibble over. But it's good, isn't it, just to have that broader perspective. So that's really what we're aiming to do.
And I might just mention that the link we have right at the moment on the website is premierinsight.org, but you mentioned one that I talked about at the very beginning, premierchristianity.com. Maybe we can add that one as we go along so that people can find that app and some of those other resources. But those are two different resources that are available. And so, Sam, I appreciate the fact that you were willing to come on the program and share a little bit about that. It is something that we are looking for, because at a time when you have so many opinions Opinions are nice, but facts are better, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. And some people, if they have a worldview that is hostile to Christianity, they're going to think that they're giving you their best facts, but it's based upon their ideology. And it's really important for us as Christians to think biblically about every area of life, to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, to think God's thoughts after him, and most importantly, know how to defend the Christian faith, because we should always be ready to make a defense for the hope that is in us. So we certainly want to salute you for what you've been doing for some time, and certainly appreciate you taking some time to come on Point of View today to join us, and I look forward to the next opportunity.
Thank you, Kerby. Really enjoyed it. So appreciate what you guys are doing as well. God bless you.
Going to take a break in just a minute. Let me just mention that before Tim Wildman came in, that one of the articles we posted had to do with, here's a good example of some things that were said that are just simply not true. And of course, you've had people making statements, for example, that 7 people lost their lives. Well, that is not true. I mean, yes, there is one individual that lost her life. That's Ashley Babbitt, who was shot and killed by an unidentified police officer. But there is a lot of inaccuracy and misinformation about this, which is really of concern. The amount of hyperbole is mentioning as well. This third page in this article that we've posted for you to read at your leisure, when you have people making the claim that January 6th was the worst attack on the Capitol since 1812, or sometimes I'll say since the Civil War. One of the commentators here reminded us that, well, actually, in 1954, 5 congressmen were wounded on the floor when 4 terrorists opened fire from the visitor center. So we simply just don't have people dealing with the basic facts. But the one that I thought was kind of interesting is one of the officers made the case, quote, that if a hitman is hired and he kills someone, the hitman goes to jail. But not only does the hitman go to jail, but the person who hired them does. Well, you can see where the implication of that is, that not only should those individuals that came to the Capitol, but even the former president of the United States should be actually prosecuted as well. And no less a spokesperson than Alan Dershowitz, formerly with the ACLU and an individual that is the emeritus professor of Harvard Law School, spoke out against just how outrageous that statement was. We will probably get into some of that tomorrow as we try to summarize a week's worth of these hearings. But I wanted you to be able to read this piece from Red State that takes on some of these factual errors, some of the evidence of hyperbole and all the rest, and concludes by simply saying that the hearing should have been focusing and should focus on the systemic failures that occurred that even allowed this to happen. But he says, ultimately, that's not really the point of the committee. Really, the point of the committee is to give all sorts of sound bites for commercials that will be used in 2022. And so I think it is appropriate to, from time to time, mention those hearings. But if you think that there's a real honest investigation of truth, well, that's not what we're finding. And I wanted to post that article so that you could, on your own, have a chance to read through it in some entirety and recognize that just a lot of things were said that are not true, and unfortunately sometimes not even challenged by the mainstream press. When we come back, I want to come back to an issue that we've talked about yesterday. What about these mask mandates? What about these vaccine mandates? We have a little more information about that, and I want to share that with you. But we back right after these messages.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour broadcasting today from Tupelo, Mississippi. We're in the studios of American Family Association and AFR, American Family Radio, and I thought it might be good just before we get into the ongoing discussion we're going to have about masks and mask mandates and vaccine mandates and much more, to see if we could just pull at least one more individual in here. We had a chance to talk with Tim Wildman. Now we have a chance to talk with Walker Wildman, and of course he is the Vice President of Operations here, and he's a host of the AFR program called AFA at the Core. And of course, some days you have Walker Wildman, sometimes you have Wesley Wildman on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And he is not in at the first hour right now because he was doing his show in another studio, but has joined us now. And Walker, great to have you here.
Kerby, good to be on your show again. I was on several months ago with your Millennial Roundtable.
Well, and I've had you on, and I've had you on the Millennial Roundtable. It's going to be harder to get you on now because you're on at 1 o'clock when we're on at 1 o'clock at Central Time.
Yeah.
But we'll see if we get you in the other hour, run some tapes and things of that nature, because you bring so much to the table, and you now have your own show. And so it's one thing to occasionally be on a program. It's another thing to do it every single day. You're starting to figure out it's kind of like a dairy farm. You have to milk the cows every day, don't you?
That's right. Yeah, it's work, but it's enjoyable, and I love interacting with our audience and bringing news and commentary for the day.
Yes, and of course enjoyed you doing that on today's issues and even with our program as well. Before we get into the radio, I thought I'd just point out that VP of Operations, across the hall here, there, and across the road, you're building this incredible building, which is dedicated to your grandfather. And I've heard that maybe we can get a tour, but I thought, I want to see it when it's done. I'll go through right now with hard hats, but it is going to be amazing. But you have to deal with all sorts of things. That multi-story building is kind of your responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah, we started planning it over 2 years ago, and so here we are actually constructing it. It's called the Don Wildman Center for Cultural Transformation. It's going to be about 20,000 square feet of new facility, and then we're remodeling the rest of the campus. So we got a big project going on here, but we got a lot of good team members on our staff to help keep things moving in order. So it's exciting. We're going through an exciting time of growth here, and it's all because of our faithful supporters out there.
Well, and again, I went over to see the newsroom there. Some of the people in that newsroom I've worked with in the past and USA Network and things like that. I've known some of the other news people, so it's been just kind of old home walking down here, meeting people. But I thought for just a minute, one of the things I talked about with your dad is that the most recent appeal letter that he had come out, is it too late for America? Now, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about that is he was pointing out the fact that when we look at the younger generation, and you are much younger than I am, you're a part of that younger generation. One of the reasons why they wanted to have your program on is that they tend to be a little less motivated for Christianity. And I, at Pro Ministries, just have been doing all sorts of interviews on this new survey, of which we've surveyed thousands of people, and concluded that what we call the unaffiliateds, lots of times people call them the nuns. Those are the people that list atheist, agnostic, and no preference. Those that are in the millennial generation, Generation Y, and those in Generation Z, sometimes called the iGen generation, those have almost tripled in terms of percentage. So it does seem to me that, as I've said before, if you build it, they will come. We've built 350,000 churches around the country. They're not coming. And I think the way to reach them is through your kind of program of really reaching out to the younger generation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons that's driving that. I mean, overall as a country in America, we have just a lot of people who are they're just unbelievers. They don't believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ. But I think one thing that may be driving that or making it worse is that people want something. They don't just want to do things because tradition says to do them, because that is a faulty argument. Let's just do this. Let's just go to church once a week because that's what we were told we're supposed to do. You've got to have a root compelling cause to do things, to live each day. I mean, we all come to work each day because we want to earn a living so that we can pay our bills and put food on the table and provide for our families. Well, the same thing with our faith. The reason we should be sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, fellowshipping with local believers, being charitable, all these things, helping our neighbor. The reason we should be doing all of them is because God's word compels us to do that. And so I think the church here in America has to restore that sense of urgency and this sense of we're not just telling you to be a good Christian, to follow God's word just because you should. We're doing it because it's all about being faithful and obedient to Christ himself.
And it does seem to me that you've got a great opportunity to reach out to the peers and even those younger than you, this generation that desperately needs to hear that, because the spiritual baton is being passed on. And I've watched it here go from your grandfather to your father, from your father to you and your brother and others. But there is really a tremendous need not only to know how to defend the Christian faith, but also now to recognize that it isn't just that they don't know it's true. For a lot of young people in your generation and younger, they're not even sure if it's good. I mean, they are buying into the idea that we're not even sure Christianity is healthy and it's good because it actually limits some people's sexuality, because it is responsible for every ill, including racism and slavery around the world. And so you have a very significant opportunity to interrupt that very secular, humanistic filibuster with the truth of the gospel.
Yeah, the secular, the world, the pagans, they want to tell you, like you said, that Christianity is prohibitive, that it's tradition and it's man-made, and that we don't need to follow it anymore. It's outdated. It's one of the main ills of the world. But in reality, what people are finding, unbelievers even, are finding is that the way of the world is so shallow and so empty. Mm-hmm. And our all of everything from a societal standpoint is getting worse. Depression is getting worse. Substance abuse is getting worse. Fatherlessness is getting worse. And somehow we think that Christianity is the problem. It's not. And what I think what some people, even young people, are beginning to realize is that marriage and family is a good thing. Mm-hmm. That having a healthy marriage, one man, one woman marriage for life, having children, and raising them and discipling, these are all good things that actually bring fulfillment and joy to one's life. And so it's kind of countercultural now to promote marriage and family and having the same spouse for your entire life until you die of a natural death. But we're still bringing that message here to the airwaves.
Well, again, I just want to let you know that we're for you. We're really excited about what you're doing, and we have a Millennial Roundtable, as you know, so we'd like to invite you to that. But occasionally, when you aren't too busy, we'd like to get you on, of course, Point of View, because we certainly value the kind of input that you are providing. And as you found out, there are just some things where we can learn from one another as we do broadcasting. So thank you for being so gracious and let us use the studio today, and thank you for giving me a few minutes here as you finished your program and headed on to probably working on all the construction the rest of the day.
Hey, thanks, Kerby. Keep up the good work. God bless you, man.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into the mask guidance and the mask mandates, the vaccine mandates. And, of course, if you'd like to join us, that number is 1-800-351-1212. And if you'd like to know more about Walker Wildman, we have a link there. Of course, you can go to afa.net or you can go to AFR. You can find all of that on our website, or you can just go out and find it right now. And very excited about the program and glad that I could have you drop by. We're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Earlier this month, I talked about the ruling from the IRS that denied tax-exempt status to the group Christians Engaged. The IRS argument was that the Bible teachings of the group align with the views of Republicans. The IRS has reversed the decision, but the controversy surfaced some issues that need to be considered. When some members of Congress heard of the IRS decision to deny the request for tax-exempt status, they fired off a letter to the IRS commissioner. They called for him to personally review this determination and remove the individual or individuals responsible for the blatantly biased, discriminatory, and flawed reasoning that led to the determination. At this point, it would be tempting to move on since the original ruling was changed. But the members of Congress in their letter pointed to a troubling issue. The reason the IRS ruled against the Christian organization was because it affirmed the sanctity of life, the definition of marriage, and biblical justice. Those are views that they argued are held by thousands of Christian churches across the country. Now, perhaps you're thinking that this is an overreaction to one IRS ruling. Perhaps, but consider that one member of Congress recently suggested that the Catholic Church should be punitively stripped of its tax-exempt status because the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops voted to draft a document that would rebuke pro-abortion Catholic politicians. It's possible that such comments are only meant to scare churches and Christian leaders into silence, or perhaps they truly believe that government should strip any tax benefits from religious groups that hold views contrary to the administration. In either case, Christians need to pay attention. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Loneliness, go to viewpoints.info/loneliness. That's viewpoints.info/loneliness.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you would like to join the conversation now, 1-800-351-1212. I want to talk a little bit about the mask mandate, the vaccine mandate, and then, if we can, get into a couple of other issues, one of which is how the phrase or the word misinformation is being used to significantly advance a liberal agenda, and how there is even legislation in front of the United States Senate that would actually even institutionalize that. So we're going to try to get into those issues. If we have time, we might even talk about the issue of whether or not we should have a, if you will, a attempt to call women into the military, the drafting of women, and a couple of other issues. We may or may not get to that in this hour. If not, we'll certainly get to it tomorrow. But let's take on the issue of the mask mandate. Our second article, which I would encourage you to read, is by the editors of National Review, in which they say that the Center for Disease Control's mask guidance will backfire. And they point out that, yes, we have to recognize that there is a Delta variant that is now making its way through the population. Now, let me hasten to add that there is as much misinformation sometimes about that, true misinformation, not the kind that is used when you want to silence conservative voices, because some people think that it's more dangerous. No, it is more contagious, but not more dangerous. It is more contagious, but not any more likely to kill you. And so what it means is that there are individuals sometimes that could have a more casual contact with somebody that have COVID-19, the Delta variant, that might, if in the past not have contracted it, now it seems to be more contagious. And that sometimes happens. But one of the things the editors point out is if you are vaccinated, the virus can't do much to harm you, even if it's the Delta variant. But if you are unvaccinated, the risk of serious health issue is what it was at the start of 2020. A minor risk if you're young and healthy, a significantly higher risk if you're elderly, you may know compromised or have other health issues. And so it is sometimes used as the justification for remasking individuals because we have this Delta variant. But unless the editors of National Review have made a serious scientific mistake, and I don't believe that they have, we are talking about something that maybe is a little more contagious than it was, but really no different than what we have been dealing with for now almost whatever number you want to use, 16 months or longer. Now, they go on a little bit later, and again, you can read this by going to the website pointofview.net. The problem, they say, for the Centers for Disease Control and the country is not the 163 million Americans who are fully vaccinated, and there's also a good chance that the 25.6 million or so Americans with the first shot will get around to getting their second shot. Now, if you do your math, then you end up with about 190 million people, in round numbers, that actually then would be vaccinated. The problem, they say, would be with the 80 million adults who are eligible to be vaccinated and haven't yet been vaccinated. But once you start with these mandates, even for people that are vaccinated, is there a possibility of a backlash or a backfire? Because then you can see individuals that are already what is called vaccine hesitant saying, well, why do I need to get it? Because even if I get the vaccine, I get the first dose, I get the second dose, and I still have to wear a mask. What's the point? As I've said, well, one of the points is that maybe you will not get it in a more significant way. But now you have even something even more significant because there's been a push to try to make sure that you get teenagers vaccinated. But when school starts in the fall, the vaccination status won't make any difference because the CDC now recommends that, quote, universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors to school, regardless of vaccination status. So you can see that even the mask mandate, and we're going to get into the vaccine mandate in just a minute, but even the mask mandate could in some respects be counterproductive to even encouraging some people that still have lingering questions about getting the vaccine, whether to do so. And they conclude with their piece that says there is little evidence that reinstating mask mandates will spur reluctant Americans to get vaccinated. There's a good chance that it will backfire as more and more of the public concludes that the Center for Disease Control guidelines can turn on a dime and contradict past statements. So that is kind of the big issue that is there. And it leads to another piece that came out from our friends at Washington Watch and the Family Research Council, the interview that was done just the other day by Tony Perkins with Senator Roger Marshall, in which they said, the new CDC guidance, which now requires that even vaccinated people need to wear masks indoors over most of the country and have urged everyone in K through 12 schools to wear a mask in the fall, are really actually having a very detrimental impact on trying to encourage more people to get vaccinated. So when you ask the question, and this question came the other day from Fox News' Peter Doocy, why do people who have had the vaccine need to now wear masks the same as people who have not had it? That's a good question. Comes from Peter Doocy of Fox News. And the response from the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was, because the public health leaders in our administration have made that determination. I love the response that Tony Perkins has to that. That response was kind of very similar to the parent who, when being asked a question by the child, says, "Because I said so." And I don't think that that's going to work very well either, especially as we will get into this in just a minute, because of the basis for this story and the basis for this rule is based upon something that happened in India, which is obviously very different than what's happening here, because generally the people that are vaccinated in this country either are vaccinated with the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine. The ones in, for example, India are actually vaccinated with the AstraZeneca. But anyway, we won't get into those details right at the moment, other than to come down to the piece that involves Senator Roger Marshall, who is an individual, by the way, who's not only a U.S. Senator, but has practiced medicine for over 25 years. And when he was on the program with Tony Perkins, he says, either the vaccine is effective or a previous infection of the virus should be effective, giving you what most people would consider to be almost 95% protection from that, even from the new Delta variant. And he said the latest decision by the CDC is just going to create, as he said, more vaccine hesitancy. It's going to backfire on the CDC. So you have statements being made in two different news magazines about this. And if you think about it, probably the ones that will surface and even maybe suffer the most are the mask rules, which are essentially cruel to the children, because, as he points out, there's a huge psychological toll from the mask, which the CDC has completely ignored in its latest statement. Depriving children of interaction with human faces hampers their development as well as their mental health. We've known from very early on in the pandemic that children are much more resistant to infection and severe infection than adults. There's really no reason, according to this commentary, why children should wear masks, yet this administration insists that they keep the mask on to protect, well, who knows, until who knows when those vaccines that haven't yet been proven safe for children will eventually be available to them. As I shared the other day, the possibility of those vaccines being available anytime soon is up to some of the regulation of the Food and Drug Administration, and probably not to come down anytime soon. So that's a whole discussion, of course, on the mandate of masks. When we come back from the break, I want to talk about the mandate to actually require vaccines. And this is, again, one of those big issues that has been put on the table. And as I shared yesterday, there is a sense of frustration which is surfacing in some of the talking head shows, maybe even in some of the various congressional meetings, but we're not privy to some of those things said behind closed doors. But when you had people honestly suggesting in a talking head show just the other day that if you want to receive any kind of federal health care, that would be Medicare, Medicaid, Veterans Administration, a variety of other services, the only way we would want you to be able to receive those services is if you were to prove that you were vaccinated. Well, that's a level of mandate that we haven't seen before. And so I want to open up the phones to give you a chance to maybe express your opinion. 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. What about mask mandates? What about the mask vaccines? We'll take all of those phone calls right after this.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook. Point of View RTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join the conversation, that is 1-800-351-1212. Going to get into this whole issue of mandating the vaccine. That has not actually happened in certain venues, but it is being talked about and maybe in others. And so we want to get that discussion going and also begin to think about what that might mean in terms of your own personal decisions and freedom. We also want to, of course, give you a chance to express your opinion, because as we learn more, we'll certainly pass it on to you. But let's take some phone calls. 1-800-351-1212. We'll go first to the state of Texas, KAVX. And Carol, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, good morning. Good afternoon.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to make some comments about this. That is just so unfair if they're going to make the vaccine mandatory for people who are on Medicare, Medicaid, all the old people's way to take care of themselves.
And again, this is only being kind of a trial balloon, but the fact that it was mentioned the other day by Margaret Hoover, that you had Rahm Emanuel and a number of others around the table. So we're talking about people that are more conservative and others that are more liberal, saying, yeah, that's probably what we need to do. There has always been kind of a carrot and a stick kind of philosophy on the part of this administration. That is, we want as many people as possible to be vaccinated so we get what's called herd immunity. Now, I'm going to come back to that in just a minute and get into a few more of the details that are now starting to surface. But up until now, we've heard mostly carrot, and that is, let's do some things to encourage you to do that. Let's, for example, say that you're part of your civic duty. Christian groups have said, you should be concerned about your brother and sister in the Lord, and you should do unto others as you would have them to do unto you, and the golden rule, and all those kinds of things. Or some are even offering the possibility that you could win a trip, a kind of a lottery, if you sign up to get the vaccine. So a lot of this has been in the area of carrot, but now we're starting to see a little bit more of the stick, in which now the mandate coming down that if you're in the federal government, you need to be vaccinated. And of course, the one that was floated the other day, again, it was only on a talk show, but I found that sometimes people will float these ideas on the talk show because they want to see how far they can push policy. And the fact is, they were saying, because you're receiving federal tax dollar benefits, because you're Veterans Administration, or and whether they also say the Affordable Care Act, but right now they were talking about Medicare and Medicaid and VA and things like that, you should then be vaccinated, but don't expect that we're going to want to spend money on you or allow you to have access to all those federal tax dollars when you refuse, as a matter of principle, not to be vaccinated. So that's the discussion I think is going to happen in the future. I'm maybe a few weeks ahead of it, and sometimes that's not such a good thing because people think it's going to happen tomorrow. But I've been able to watch some of these ways in which they try a trial balloon and see how people react to it. So that's why I want to put it on the table. And it does strike me, as you just pointed out, to seem terribly unfair. I think we should consider the risks of the vaccine. And it brings me to the third article that we're going to talk about for just a minute. But if you'd like to join us, that number is 1-800-351-1212. Third article is entitled "To Mandate or Not to Mandate Vaccines." Comes from our friends at the Wall Street Journal, in which they point out that, as we've been talking about here today, that when you have this what's called the Delta variant, and that increases not the lethality or not even the possibility that it would have more detrimental effect, but it is maybe more transmissible. And I think that gets lost in some of this debate, that it is certainly no more dangerous than what we've been dealing with for the last 16 months. But nevertheless, because of that, we have a number of adults that are not vaccinated. The older you are, the more likely you are to be vaccinated. The younger you are, maybe not so, either because of choice or in some cases, because especially when you're talking about very young people, that has either just been now available to them, or in the case of those 12 and under, isn't even particularly licensed yet. But when you deal with a fairly significant number of adults that haven't been vaccinated, and you have the Delta variant, and then the possibility that we're heading into the flu season, that's why you're starting to see some of these mandates coming down. In California, for example, where 78% of the adults have received at least one vaccine dose, COVID has never really been eradicated, but the threshold for herd immunity has probably increased because of the Delta variant. So it's almost like, in some respects, they didn't just move the goalpost. The variant might have moved them a little bit. So you're starting to hear more and more about these mandates, a federal mandate, state mandate, California, New York. There's another issue, and that is, would this be mandated by private employers? And here, again, the Wall Street Journal says the matter is different for these private employers who should be able to set their own workplace rules. Most have been letting employees choose, but some may decide that mandates are necessary to ensure a safe workplace and reduce absenteeism. So whereas there might be some hesitation, and even when we look at some of the things that are being proposed right now, for example, Governor Gavin Newsom and others, even what's been maybe suggested now in New York City, in some of the hospitals where there are mandates now that I think there's mandates in the Mayo Clinic and even all the way down to Houston Methodist and some of those. That is different when you talk about an employee and an employer relationship, a little more significant. So we may see those mandates surfacing in that way. And then, of course, the editors of the Wall Street Journal point out something else. Right now, Americans are citing the fact that the FDA has only given emergency approval for these vaccines, which is true. But it has, I think, an illustration of the fact that when we want the government to move quickly, it moves slowly. And if there was one thing you got to give Donald Trump credit for, he was able to move the bureaucracies a lot faster. And the United States has administered about 395 million vaccine doses. Most of those are Moderna and Pfizer. And so that gives them more where they could collect it and move it from experimental to actually approved. But that's another whole issue that needs to be considered when we talk about the mandating of vaccines. But let's take some more phone calls, because some of you indeed would want to weigh in with your comments or questions. So we'll head out first of all to Arizona, KNLB, and Martha. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you for being there, Kerby. So this is the thing. This is very, very intrusive into our medical business, all right? And if we don't stand up and stop it now, I think they're going to force it, see how far they can go with the socialism. It's not just the private sector. It's not just the federal employees. I mean, the way I learned that the vaccine was mandated at my facility was I got a bunch of emails for openings for job positions, including mine, and then they sent out the mandatory mandate that you had to be vaccinated or it could cost you your job, basically is what they're saying. And what's next? I don't agree with this administration and the way they spend our money. So what's next? The number of Twinkies I eat, I'm going to lose my health insurance, or the number of children I have? I mean, this is absolutely crazy. Given the choice, Americans will do the right thing, and I think we have. And I asked employee health, I said, what about the people that have already had COVID and have natural immunity? And they refused to respond. So it's do what I say and get over it, American public. And
again, I think there's pretty good evidence just on that last point that actually the natural immunity that you might have received from getting COVID-19 may be better because it was produced within your body. Now, the goal of the mRNA is to actually introduce in your body something that looks like the spike protein on COVID-19 to stimulate that. But again, that's a little more artificial. So there's a good example of, and I think you've pointed to another topic, and that is there are some people that may really say, I don't need the vaccine. And matter of fact, it might even have too much of what's called a viral load, because some of the people that had very strong second vaccine reactions or booster reactions were due to the fact that maybe they had accidentally had COVID-19 already in their system, and this maybe began to stress their system. So, but I think you point out very quickly, I got to go to a break, that, okay, we won't mandate it, but we will say that we're going to look for people that might want to get your position and either overtly or subtly of forcing people to go and get the vaccine if they work for a particular company. So I appreciate your comment, and I want to take some more calls, but we have a mandatory break, so we'll come back with more right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and if you would like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Finishing off here today at American Family Radio Association, AFR. And again, I encourage you to find out a little bit more about them, and afa.net is a good website to find. But let's take some more phone calls as we're talking about this idea of not only a mask mandate, but a vaccine mandate. And then I want to finish off with some of the comments people are talking about in the federal government about misinformation, especially health misinformation. But let's head out, first of all, to Utah. And Vern, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'd love to hear what you'd like to add to our conversation.
Well, I was just thinking if they get this pushed through, our playbook will be just like China's. We can watch that, you know. And now it'll be what are they going to do after that? The sterilization for the public after that? You know what I mean? I mean, we're just going to stop.
Well, and again, that is one of the questions that people are asking, because once I can dictate your public health, and we said this back when there was a debate about the Affordable Care Act, oftentimes called Obamacare. When I can control that, you can begin to think of some of the concerns that are raised. And a good illustration of that is an article that came out this morning, so it's not on our list. Maybe I'll add it in the future. But it's written by Mario Loyola. I have not really known who he is, but he's with the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and it's called The True Meaning of Misinformation. One of the cut lines is, public safety is an old justification for persecuting political opponents. In other words, if people are engaged in misinformation as defined by the person that determines what is true, then you can be shut down. And we have seen that in other countries. Certainly China is an example you're using, but even here in the United States. And he really starts by pointing out the fact that there is a piece of legislation that has been proposed by Senators Amy Klobuchar and others, which would be designed to try to suppress what is called dangerous misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines. Now, when you say that, everybody signs off on it. The other day, when the president, for example, said we need to really begin to clamp down on Facebook and social media because of misinformation, what is actually being suggested is that what is really misinformation is something that deviates even slightly from what at the time is being proposed by that administration. And he refers to this particular aspect of the Department of Health and Human Services as the Ministry of Public Health Truth. Now, he's playing off of course, the idea of the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's book, 1984. But you can see that when you start having questions about so-called misinformation, it is, first of all, used, of course, to shut down any kind of obvious falsehoods and to try to suppress any kind of falsehoods that are actually discussed about vaccines or about the virus. But it also very quickly morphs into also suppressing the right of people that you disagree with to speak obvious truth. And if there hasn't been an example of that, you can think of what before was said as, oh, you don't need a mask. Then, oh, yes, we do need a mask. Now we're saying, well, maybe masks aren't as good as we thought they were. That particular set of goalposts has been moved time and time again. And to give you an idea of what would happen when you start having fact checkers out there, PolitiFact in this article reminds us that there are these videos that are out there in which during the campaign and then shortly thereafter when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were elected, you have both candidate Joe Biden and candidate Kamala Harris saying they're not going to take the vaccine. And then even President-elect Joe Biden saying something very similar. But the response from our fact checkers, which was PolitiFact, is, oh, no, these people weren't challenging the vaccine. They were simply challenging Donald Trump's rollout of the vaccine. And I love what Mario Loya says. This distinction is absurd. It's a lie. It's a good example of misinformation because you can go back and watch those videos. Matter of fact, the other day we posted an article that actually had what's called a mashup of the various statements made by candidate and then President-elect Joe Biden and candidate then Vice President-elect Kamala Harris saying they wouldn't take the vaccine. But once they got into power, not only were they not expressing hesitation about it, but they now want to mandate it on everyone. And the fact is that now if you're going to allow people to do fact-checking and maybe even have a department of the Department of Health and Human Services to define medical misinformation, you can see how quickly quickly that would be abused. So this is an issue that we need to address in the future, and that's one of the reasons why I'm bringing up some of it today. Let's go back to the phones if we can and talk to John in Georgia. What would you like to add to our conversation?
Well, I agree, that the shot should not be mandated by individuals or companies or organizations. But I also know that, for instance, anyone who has gotten COVID in the past and had to go to the hospital, the average cost is about $37,000, which, God bless America, we have picked up the tab for everybody. And that says something about our nation and who we are. But the point is, now you have an answer. You've got these vaccines. Now, if you don't want it, that's great. But I don't think we should have to pick up the tab if you get COVID and have to go to the hospital anymore. Here's your solution. You don't want it, that's fine. But you're not going to get on the dole and get your medication and your hospitalization for free on the taxpayer's back. That's my thought.
Well, again, that's the kind of argument being made right now, because you're costing us because you got sick. Now, I'd hate to get to the point where anybody gets sick, then we have to force them to pay for it. But you're right. We are a very generous nation, and we've been generously willing to cover the cost of the vaccines and even the cost of treatment. And, of course, it gets back to other questions as well. You ride a motorcycle without a helmet, and then we have to pick up the cost because of the injuries you received because you didn't take due diligence. These are the kind of fundamental questions I think we're going to be asking over the next couple of months. So I think you're right on target, and those are the kind of things we're going to be hearing about. So I wish we had more time, because we have, as always, more phone calls than we have time to get to. But I think John did a good job of kind of expressing what I think is going to be the kind of justification for a vaccine mandate, or indeed, if indeed we don't have a vaccine mandate, a sense of impersonal liability that you would have to be responsible for if indeed you decide not to take it. So those are going to be these ongoing debates and discussions and topics that we will certainly be addressing. So let me encourage you, if you have more comments about this, to join us tomorrow. We're going to be back in Dallas, and both Kelly Shackelford and Penna Dexter will be there with us. So if you would like to ask some questions, make some comments, feel free to do so. Let me also real quickly point out that my Viewpoints commentary today, which we didn't get to, but maybe we can cover tomorrow with Kelly Shackelford, has to do with the IRS and churches, because of his work at First Liberty, was able to assure that Christians engaged were able to actually receive their 501c3 tax-exempt status. But in the commentary, I raised the point, and there were other members of Congress that raised the point, even with the IRS, that if you're going to penalize a Christian organization for holding to Christian views, those same Christian views are held by, hundreds, at least 100, 200,000 churches, maybe not all 350,000 churches, but 100,000 plus churches hold to these orthodox views. And if you would deny tax-exempt status to a Christian organization, would you not then be forced to deny it to a church? So there's some religious liberty issues, but we're simply out of time. I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help. I want to thank our good friends here at American Family Radio. Hope that you have a great day, and we will see you back here on Point of View.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. pointofview.net/signup. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.